The glass doors of the bank slid open with a soft hiss, and Marcus Cole stepped inside just as the security guard's eyes locked onto him. Not glanced, not noticed, locked. Marcus felt it immediately. The subtle shift in air, the invisible pause that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with assumption. He adjusted the cuff of his charcoal blazer, not because it needed fixing, but because habit had taught him something important long ago. Never react first. The bank lobby was already alive. Low murmurs, the hum of printers, polished floors reflecting ceiling lights like mirrors. A woman in a cream coat was laughing softly at the counter, documents spread out neatly in front of her. Two men in tailored suits stood nearby, speaking in hushed, confident tones, their voices carrying the ease of people who expected to be served. Marcus waited. 30 seconds passed, then a minute. The teller glanced up briefly, her eyes skimming past him before returning to her screen. Another customer walked in behind him, a younger man, hoodie, earbuds in, and was greeted immediately. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" Marcus didn't move. He didn't interrupt. He didn't raise a hand. He simply watched. This wasn't his first time feeling it, but today felt sharper. He checked his watch. He had a meeting in 45 minutes. Plenty of time. No rush. That was the luxury of control. Time bends differently when you own it. Finally, after nearly 5 minutes, the teller looked up again. "Yes?" she said, her tone clipped, rehearsed, cautious. "Do you have an appointment?" Marcus stepped forward calmly. "No appointment. I'm here to finalize a wire authorization and access documents related to my corporate accounts." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Not in recognition, in doubt. "Okay," she said slowly. "I'll need to see your ID and, the account numbers." Marcus slid his wallet out, placing his ID on the counter with a smooth, practiced motion. He didn't slam it, didn't hesitate. His name sat there clearly printed. Marcus Elijah Cole. She picked it up, examined it longer than necessary, typed something into her system, paused. Her fingers stopped moving. She frowned. "Well," she continued, "without proper documentation, I won't be able to assist you today." Marcus looked past her briefly at the other tellers, at the customers being helped without friction, at the ease with which doors opened for others. Then he looked back at her. "What documentation would you need?" he asked. She hesitated. "Corporate authorization letters, possibly notarized, and confirmation from headquarters." Marcus nodded slowly. "Interesting," he said, "because I accessed these same accounts here 3 months ago with the same ID." Her smile faltered. "I'll need to call my manager," she said quickly. "Of course," Marcus replied. She stood, walked briskly to the glass office, and closed the door behind her. The security guard's radio crackled softly. Marcus exhaled through his nose, hands clasped behind his back. He stood tall, still, unthreatening. He had learned years ago that composure unsettled people more than confrontation. Minutes passed. Customers came and went. The manager emerged, a man in his early 50s, clean-cut, confident. His eyes swept over Marcus, assessing, categorizing, deciding, all within seconds. "What seems to be the issue?" the manager asked, not to Marcus, but to the teller. She whispered. The manager nodded, then turned to Marcus. "Sir," he said, voice firm but polite, "there appears to be some confusion regarding the accounts you're requesting access to." "I don't believe there is," Marcus said calmly. The manager smiled thinly. "These are high-security corporate accounts. Typically, representatives schedule appointments." Marcus met his gaze. "I am not a representative." The manager paused. Then, "I am the account holder." Silence. Not disbelief. Something worse. The manager's eyes flicked again, to the security guard, then back to Marcus. "Sir," he said, lowering his voice, If you're unable to provide the necessary verification, I'm going to have to ask you to return at another time. Marcus felt the shift, the unspoken suggestion embedded in the words. Return later. Bring proof. Prove you belong here. He leaned in slightly. Before I do, Marcus said, can you explain what policy requires additional verification today that did not require it 3 months ago? The manager stiffened. That information isn't something I need to disclose, he replied. Marcus nodded once. Understood. The security guard took a step closer. That was the moment. Not when service was refused. Not when doubt crept in. But when authority closed ranks instead of seeking truth. Marcus straightened his jacket. Thank you for your time, he said evenly. He turned and walked toward the exit. Behind him, the manager exhaled, tension draining from his shoulders as if the problem had resolved itself. The doors slid shut. Outside, Marcus paused. He didn't look back. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Evelyn, he said when the line connected. I need a full internal audit request prepared. Today, a pause. Yes, he added calmly, starting with Heritage National Bank. He ended the call and stood there for a moment, watching his reflection ripple in the glass. They had no idea what they'd just set in motion. Across town, the boardroom of Cole Strategic Holdings buzzed with quiet urgency. Evelyn Price sat at the head of the table, eyes sharp, fingers steepled. She had worked with Marcus for over a decade. She knew his tone, knew when calm meant control and when calm meant consequences. He was denied access? She asked. Yes, Marcus replied via speakerphone, without cause. That's unusual, one board member said carefully. Marcus didn't respond. Evelyn leaned forward. I want everything, she said. Past complaints, internal memos, branch-level discretion policies, settlement records, anything involving customer disputes. A younger associate frowned. That could open Pandora's box, Evelyn finished. Good, Marcus's voice cut in. No retaliation, no noise, quiet precision. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. This wasn't about ego, this was about exposure. Back at the bank, the teller laughed nervously with her co-worker. Did you see his face? She said. Like he owned the place. The manager didn't laugh. Something about the interaction lingered in his mind. Not guilt, unease. The security guard returned to his post, already forgetting Marcus's face. That was the problem. By evening, Evelyn had her first report. Heritage National Bank had settled 4 discrimination-related complaints in the past 18 months. All quiet, all paid, all unresolved. She stared at the screen. Marcus, she said softly into the phone, this is bigger than we thought. Marcus sat in his office, city lights glowing behind him. Then we proceed, he said. If this story already has you thinking about how power and bias intersect in everyday spaces, take a second to like the video. It helps stories like this reach the people who need to hear them. The next morning, Heritage National's stock dipped slightly, barely noticeable. But markets had a way of sensing tension before people did. A journalist sent an inquiry email, then another. By noon, the bank's legal department flagged an unusual volume of internal data requests. At 3:17 p.m., the CEO was briefed. What do you mean an audit request? He asked sharply. From Cole Strategic Holdings, the lawyer replied. They're one of our largest silent partners. The CEO froze. Cole, as in Marcus Cole? Yes. Silence stretched across the line. Why wasn't I informed about any incident? The CEO demanded. Another pause. We weren't aware it was him. The CEO closed his eyes. That was when he understood. This wasn't a complaint. This was a reckoning. That evening, Marcus stood alone in his office, watching the city pulse below. His phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered. Mr. Cole, a voice said carefully. "This is Heritage National Bank. We'd like to apologize for any misunderstanding earlier today." Marcus listened. "We'd be happy to personally assist you." "No," Marcus said quietly. The voice faltered. "We'd like to make this right." Marcus leaned back, eyes distant. "You already did," he said, "by showing me exactly what needs to change." He ended the call. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Inside, the first domino had already fallen. Heritage National believed the situation could be smoothed over. They had no idea the investigation had already begun, and that within days, millions would be on the line. The CEO of Heritage National Bank did not sleep that night. By dawn, the word misunderstanding had already vanished from internal emails. It was replaced by words like exposure, risk, and containment. The tone shifted fast, because when institutions sense danger, politeness is the first thing they abandon. At 6:12 a.m., an emergency executive call was scheduled. By 6:13, everyone was already logged in. "Let's be very clear," the CEO began, his voice tight. "Marcus Cole is not just a client. He's a strategic partner with indirect influence across 3 of our investment arms." A senior vice president cleared her throat. "With respect, the incident appears minor." The CEO's jaw tightened. "Bias is never minor when it's documented." Silence followed. "Where is the branch manager?" he asked. "Placed on administrative leave," the legal counsel replied. "As of this morning." "And the teller?" "Pending review." The CEO exhaled slowly. "I want a full internal assessment. Every complaint, every settlement. No filters." Someone spoke carefully. "If this becomes public—" "It already is," the CEO snapped. "We just don't know it yet." Marcus Cole woke up calm. That, more than anything, unsettled the people around him. He sat at the edge of his bed, reading reports on his tablet as the sun crept through the blinds. Numbers, timelines, patterns. He wasn't reliving the moment at the bank. He wasn't angry. He was focused. Bias, he knew, rarely stood alone. It traveled in systems, in policies written vaguely enough to excuse behavior, in silence that rewarded those who enforced them selectively. At 7:45 a.m., Evelyn arrived at his office. "They're scrambling," she said, dropping a thick folder on his desk. "And they should be." Marcus skimmed the first page. "How bad is it?" he asked. Evelyn hesitated. "Worse than we thought. This isn't just discrimination, it's structural." She pointed to a highlighted section. "Branch-level discretion policies, loosely defined. No standardized enforcement, which means bias had room to breathe." Marcus nodded. "And now?" "Now." She looked up. "Now the regulators are sniffing around." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Good," he said quietly. At Heritage National's headquarters, the legal department was already overwhelmed. Phones rang non-stop. Compliance officers whispered in hallways. A junior analyst stared at her screen, hands trembling slightly as she reviewed a decade's worth of customer complaints. "Sir," she said to her supervisor, "these aren't isolated." He rubbed his temples. "I know. What do we do?" He didn't answer. Because the truth was ugly. They had known for years. They had just never expected someone powerful enough to force accountability. The first article dropped at noon. Not accusatory, not explosive, just curious. Questions raised over Heritage National Bank's internal policies after audit request by major stakeholder. Markets reacted subtly at first, a dip, then another. By closing bell, the bank had lost 2.3% in market value, millions. Phones rang non-stop. Compliance officers whispered in hallways. A junior analyst stared at her screen, hands trembling slightly as she reviewed a decade's worth of customer complaints. "Sir," she said to her supervisor, "these aren't isolated." He rubbed his temples. "I know. What do we do?" He didn't answer. because the truth was ugly. They had known for years. They had just never expected someone powerful enough to force accountability. The first article dropped at noon, not accusatory, not explosive, just curious. Questions raised over Heritage National Bank's internal policies after audit request by major stakeholder. Markets reacted subtly at first, a dip, then another. By closing bell, the bank had lost 2.3% in market value. Millions. Gone. Marcus watched the numbers update on his screen. Evelyn stood nearby. "They'll call again." "They already did," Marcus replied. She raised an eyebrow. "I didn't answer." The next call came from the CEO himself. "Marcus," he said, forcing warmth into his voice, "I want to apologize personally for what you experienced." Marcus listened without interrupting. "That branch failed you," the CEO continued. "We're taking immediate corrective action." Marcus's response was measured. "I didn't experience failure," he said. "I experienced policy." A pause. "Then let us correct the policy," the CEO said quickly. Marcus stood and walked toward the window. The city stretched endlessly below him, full of systems that worked for some and not for others. "You can't correct what you don't fully confront," Marcus replied, "and confrontation requires transparency." Another pause, longer this time. "What are you asking for?" the CEO asked. Marcus turned back to his desk. "Everything," he said. Inside Heritage National, panic spread. Departments were instructed to preserve records. No deletions, no edits. Employees whispered in break rooms. Some were angry, some were afraid, and some were guilty. The branch manager, the same man who had dismissed Marcus, sat alone in his living room, staring at his phone. Administrative leave, no timeline, no reassurance. He replayed the moment in his mind. If only I had checked the account. But deep down, he knew that wasn't the real mistake. 3 days later, regulators formally announced a review. That was when things began to unravel publicly. News anchors speculated. Social media debated. Former employees spoke anonymously. One post went viral. "We were trained to trust our instincts." Looking back, that meant trusting our biases. Heritage National's stock dropped another 4%. Board members demanded answers, investors demanded heads, and somewhere between damage control and denial, the bank realized something terrifying. This was no longer about Marcus Cole. Marcus received an unexpected call that evening. A woman's voice. Calm. Familiar. "This is Angela Morris," she said. "Former compliance officer at Heritage National." Marcus straightened slightly. "I've been trying to reach someone," she continued. "Someone who would listen." "I'm listening," Marcus said. She inhaled sharply. "They buried things, complaints, patterns. I flagged them years ago." "Why call now?" Marcus asked. "Because I'm tired," she said. "And because what happened to you, it could have been me." Silence filled the line. "I want to testify," she added, "but I need protection." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. "You'll have it," he said. That call changed everything. Evelyn knew it the moment Marcus told her. "An insider?" she said. "That shifts the balance completely." Marcus nodded. "Truth always does." At Heritage National, the CEO learned about Angela Morris from a panicked legal advisor. "She's reached out," the advisor said, "to Cole." The CEO slammed his fist onto the table. "Find out what she knows," he snapped. But it was already too late. The hearings were announced the following week. Public, televised, unavoidable. Executives rehearsed statements, lawyers refined defenses, HR drafted new policy proposals, rushed, reactive, hollow. Marcus prepared quietly. He didn't rehearse speeches. He reviewed facts. The day of the hearing, the room buzzed with tension. Cameras lined the walls. Reporters whispered. The bank's leadership sat stiffly at one end of the table. Marcus entered last. No entourage, no dramatics, just presence. Eyes followed him, not because of his wealth, but because this was the man they hadn't recognized. The questioning began. Policies, procedures, oversight. Then Angela Morris took the stand. Her voice trembled at first, then steadied. "I warned them," she said, repeatedly. "Warned them about what?" a senator asked. "About discretion being weaponized," Angela replied. "About bias hiding behind policy." The room fell silent. Marcus watched the executives shift uncomfortably. This wasn't revenge. This was exposure. By the end of the day, headlines screamed, "Whistleblower confirms pattern of discrimination at major bank." Markets reacted violently. Another 6% drop. Layoff rumors surfaced. Internal memos leaked. Heritage National's reputation, once pristine, began to fracture. That night, Marcus stood alone again, city lights flickering. Evelyn joined him quietly. "They're offering a settlement," she said. Marcus didn't turn. "Money?" he asked. "And silence." Marcus laughed softly. Not amused, not bitter. "Telling," he said. He turned to her, eyes steady. "No," he said. "We're not done." The bank thought exposure was the worst outcome. They were wrong. Because the next phase wouldn't just cost them money. It would cost people their jobs, their power, and their future. The layoffs began on a Tuesday. No warning, no press release. Just emails that landed in inboxes with subject lines that pretended to be gentle. Organizational realignment. Strategic workforce adjustment. Words designed to soften a blow that would still knock the air out of thousands of lungs. At 9:03 a.m., the first branch closed its doors. By noon, 5 more followed. Employees stood outside holding cardboard boxes, faces stunned, eyes scanning the street as if the city itself might offer answers the bank never would. Inside Heritage National's headquarters, the atmosphere had shifted from panic to survival. This was no longer about optics. This was about containment. Marcus Cole watched the footage silently. Muted screens showed former employees speaking to reporters, some angry, some confused, some defending the bank despite everything. Evelyn stood beside him, arms crossed. "They're blaming market pressure," she said, "not discrimination." Marcus nodded. "That's expected." She frowned. "People are losing their jobs." "Yes," Marcus replied quietly. "And the bank is hoping that becomes the story instead of why this happened." He leaned forward, elbows on his desk. "They want chaos," he continued, "because chaos blurs responsibility." At Heritage National, the CEO addressed senior leadership. "We need a face-saving exit," he said, voice strained. "Something that looks decisive." A board member leaned in. "You mean a resignation?" The room went still. "Whose?" someone asked. Eyes shifted. Slowly, deliberately, they landed on the head of compliance. The CEO didn't argue. Sacrifice, after all, had always been part of the system. Angela Morris sat at her kitchen table, staring at her phone. Since the hearing, her name had been everywhere. Support messages, threats, requests for interviews. Her hands shook slightly as she typed a response declining another media appearance. She hadn't expected this. She had done what she believed was right, but righteousness didn't insulate you from fear. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Angela?" Marcus said. Her shoulders relaxed instantly. "I didn't know if you'd call," she admitted. "I wanted to check on you," Marcus replied. "This is the hardest part." She swallowed. "They're trying to discredit me." "They always do," Marcus said. "It means you're effective." A pause. "Do you regret it?" he asked gently. Angela closed her eyes. "No," she said, "but I'm tired." Marcus's voice softened. "Change is exhausting," he said. but silence is heavier. Inside the bank, internal emails leaked again. This time, they weren't about policies. They were about people. Names, performance notes, speculation. One message read, "We need to be careful who we put forward. Optics matter." Another, "Avoid elevating anyone connected to past complaints." The public reaction was swift. Hashtags trended, boycotts began. Heritage National's brand, built over decades, was being dismantled in real time. The CEO requested another call with Marcus. This time, there was no pretense. "We can't sustain this," the CEO admitted. "Our investors are revolting." Marcus listened, face unreadable. "We're prepared to implement every reform you requested," the CEO continued. "Independent oversight, leadership changes, public accountability." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "And the layoffs?" he asked. A pause. "We had no choice." Marcus's eyes hardened. "There's always a choice," he said. "You just chose profit preservation over accountability." The CEO exhaled sharply. "What do you want, Marcus?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was steady. "I want the truth acknowledged," he said. "Not managed." That night, a leaked memo confirmed what many feared. The head of compliance had resigned. Not the executives who ignored warnings, not the managers who enforced bias, just the person closest to oversight. The public outrage intensified. Former employees began speaking out. Patterns emerged, stories echoed, and slowly, painfully, a collective realization took hold. This wasn't a single incident. It was a culture. Marcus attended a private meeting with several institutional investors. Some were frustrated. Some were furious. "This has gone too far," one said. "You've made your point." Marcus met his gaze. "If this were about a point," he said, "it would have ended at the bank counter." Another investor leaned forward. "People are getting hurt." "Yes," Marcus replied. "That's what happens when systems break." Silence followed. Then Evelyn spoke. "What's happening now," she said, "is not vengeance. It's correction." If you're still watching, it means this story resonates. Consider sharing your thoughts in the comments. Stories like this matter more when conversations follow. Heritage National's stock fell again, this time double digits. Analysts downgraded ratings. Regulators expanded the scope of their investigation. The CEO's resignation rumors grew louder. Inside the boardroom, the mood turned desperate. "We need a public apology," a director said. "A real one." "And then?" another asked. "And then we pray," he replied. The press conference was announced for Friday. Cameras were set, statements drafted. Marcus was invited to attend. He declined. "I don't need to be seen," he told Evelyn. "I need them to be honest." Friday came. The CEO stood behind the podium, hands gripping the edges tightly. "We failed," he said. Gasps rippled through the room. "We failed our customers, we failed our employees, and we failed to confront bias when it mattered." For a moment, it felt real. Then came the qualifiers, then the deflections, then the promises, late, rushed, rehearsed. Marcus watched from his office. He turned the screen off halfway through. "They still don't get it," he said. Evelyn sighed. "No," she agreed. "They don't." That afternoon, Marcus received a message he hadn't expected. From the board chair of Heritage National. Private, urgent, requesting a meeting. Marcus stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he replied, "Yes." The meeting took place in a quiet conference room overlooking the city. No cameras, no lawyers, just Marcus and the board chair. "We're prepared to make a change," the chair said. "A real one." Marcus folded his hands. "I'm listening." "We want you to take an active role," the chair continued. "Oversight, direction, influence." Marcus raised an eyebrow slightly. "You want me inside," he said. "We want credibility," the chair corrected. Marcus leaned back, studying the man. And control, he added. The chair didn't deny it. Outside, the city moved on. People went to work. Others looked for new jobs. The ripples of bias continued spreading, touching lives far removed from the original moment at the bank counter. Marcus thought of the security guard, the teller, the manager, not with anger, but with clarity. That evening, Angela called again. "They're offering me a settlement," she said quietly. Marcus closed his eyes. "Did they ask you to be silent?" he asked. "Yes." "And what do you want to do?" She hesitated. "I want this to mean something." Marcus smiled faintly. "Then it already does." Late that night, Marcus stood alone in his office once more. Evelyn joined him. "They want you on the board," she said. Marcus nodded. "They think that will fix it," she added. Marcus looked out at the city, lights flickering like distant stars. "It might," he said, "if they let it." He turned to her. "But that's the risk." The boardroom felt different when Marcus Cole walked in. Not tense, not defensive, uncertain. The long, polished table reflected the city skyline behind him, a reminder of the institution's reach and its fragility. Every seat was filled. Board members sat straighter than usual, hands folded, expressions carefully neutral. Marcus took his seat without ceremony. "Thank you for meeting with me," the board chair began. "We understand the gravity of this moment." Marcus didn't respond immediately. He looked around the room, at the people who had once believed this problem could be settled quietly, efficiently, without consequence. "You didn't invite me here to talk about gravity," Marcus said calmly. "You invited me here because the ground is giving way." No one disagreed. The chair nodded. "We want to move forward." Marcus leaned forward slightly. "Then we start by being honest about how we got here." Silence settled over the room, like weight. The investigation's final report landed 2 days later. It was thorough, unforgiving, impossible to spin. The findings were clear. Bias had not been incidental. It had been enabled, protected, normalized. Branch-level discretion had allowed subjective judgment to override policy. Complaints had been dismissed, whistleblowers sidelined, settlements used as silence. The report didn't name villains. It named systems, and systems, once exposed, demanded dismantling. The CEO resigned the same afternoon. No dramatic speech, no defiance. Just a short statement acknowledging failure. Markets reacted immediately, but this time not with panic. With relief. Heritage National's stock stabilized. Not because the damage was undone, but because accountability had finally begun. Marcus watched the news coverage quietly. Evelyn stood beside him. "They'll try to frame this as closure," she said. Marcus nodded. "It isn't." "No," she agreed. "It's a beginning." Angela Morris received formal protection under whistleblower statutes. Her settlement offer was withdrawn. Instead, she was invited to help shape new compliance structures. She cried when she told Marcus. "I didn't think this would happen," she said. Marcus smiled softly. "That's how change usually feels," he replied. Unexpected. Inside the bank, the restructuring was painful. Entire departments dissolved. Others were rebuilt from the ground up. New leadership was appointed, not quietly, not conveniently, but publicly, transparently. Training programs were rewritten. Oversight tightened. Metrics changed. Discretion was no longer a shield. Marcus accepted a formal advisory role, but on his terms. He refused ceremonial influence. He demanded measurable authority, quarterly audits, independent reporting lines, zero-tolerance policies. The board agreed. They had learned the cost of resistance. Weeks later, Marcus returned to the branch where it had all begun. No cameras, no entourage, just him. The lobby looked the same, but it felt different. A new manager stood behind the counter, younger, nervous. She recognized him instantly. "Mr. Cole," she said. "Welcome." Marcus nodded. "I'm not here as an executive," he said. "I'm here as a customer." She smiled. "Of course." The transaction took minutes. No hesitation, no suspicion, no performance of authority. As Marcus turned to leave, the security guard, new, unfamiliar, held the door open. "Have a good day, sir," he said. Marcus paused. "You too," he replied. And for the first time since this began, he felt something close to peace. But the story didn't end there, because stories like this never do. Across the industry, other institutions took notice. Policies were reviewed, practices questioned. Some changes were sincere, others were cosmetic. Marcus knew the difference, and so did the public. Months later, Marcus was invited to speak at a closed-door industry summit. He didn't bring slides, he didn't bring data, he brought a story. "I walked into a bank one morning," he told them, voice steady, "and walked out invisible." The room was silent. "I didn't buy accountability," he continued. "I demanded it, and it nearly broke the system that refused to see me." He paused. "Bias isn't loud," Marcus said. "It's quiet, efficient, polite, and expensive." No one applauded. They didn't need to. That night, Marcus stood on his balcony, city lights stretching endlessly. Evelyn joined him, handing him a glass of water. "Do you think it was worth it?" she asked. Marcus considered the question. He thought of the employees who lost their jobs, the ones who spoke up, the ones who stayed silent. He thought of Angela, the boardroom, the teller. "Yes," he said finally, "because now they know." "Know what?" "That bias has a bill," Marcus replied, "and sooner or later someone pays it." The final report was published publicly a week later. It was downloaded millions of times, cited in lawsuits, referenced in boardrooms, taught in business schools. If this story moved you, challenged you, or made you see everyday systems differently, take a moment to subscribe. Like the video. Share your thoughts in the comments. Stories like this only change the world when people keep the conversation alive. Marcus Cole never spoke about that day again in interviews. He didn't need to. The system remembered, and so did everyone watching. If you were Marcus, how would you have handled that moment at the counter? And do you think bias is easier to ignore when it doesn't cost money?